That's great.
There you go.
I love that.
Yeah, look determined. Look determined.
Oh.
Look determined. Don't smile. Don't smile. Determined. Keep the bastards out.
Can I get a chant? Can I get a chant? A chant.
Is there anyone? Okay, here you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting us. Well, as long as I'm standing here, I might as well start our show. What do you say? Get into it as quickly as possible. My name is Hudson Talbot. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I am a resident here in Catskill in Greene County for 33 years. And my opening quote tonight was going to be, and I guess it still applies, from Thomas Cole. We are still in Eden. Although, if you look around it tonight, Thomas Cole was like the first environmentalist. He lived and worked right here. His whole career was about preserving the beautiful environment that we have right here in Greene County, the Catskills. The whole quote I'm going to butcher, but it's something like, "We are still in Eden." Thank you. It is only the walls of our mind that keep us out. So I do think that's applicable tonight. And I just want to thank you all so much for coming and for caring. We're the ones who are stepping up to the plate here and looking at this issue. Wheelabrator is an incineration company, a garbage incineration company that produces energy. They also generate a huge amount of ash. They're looking for a place to get rid of their ash, to dump their ash. They found Peckham. I don't know who approached who, but in any case, they are in negotiations with two private companies talking about them coming here to dump their residue ash. So all of our experts tonight will go into much greater detail about what happened. How I got into it was simply they came and made two presentations to the town and one to the village. I happened to be there at the village when I heard them, and all right, fine. It was it was basically a commercial for Wheelabrator, and as you can imagine, very positive, upbeat. And then the next day, a friend wrote me and said, "Google Wheelabrator lawsuits." Yeah, which is what I did, and that's when it all started unraveling. That sort of like that happy vision of what Wheelabrator was and what they were going to bring to Catskill. They were lawsuits. Doesn't mean that they did anything. But it certainly was a red flag to me that there would be so many at different places where they are located now, up and down the Hudson Valley. They're actually in a lot of places in various parts of the country, right? You're fine. Anyway, so that brought me to wanting to know more and wanting to know where the town was with it, because they had heard the presentation. The town is taking a neutral position, and I respect that. That's their choice, and that's what they're going to do. And I have a statement here that was provided to me. So it's the official statement. Okay, how's this? Okay, the official statement of the town of Catskill is this: in response to calls from interest groups to address a potential siting of a monofill in the town of Catskill. Since 2016, the board of the town of Catskill and the public have received two presentations on monofills at regularly scheduled open town board meetings, which are streamed live and publicly archived. In those briefings, we were made aware that two private companies were in discussions about submitting an application for a permit involving a currently unused quarry in the town of Catskill. To date, no such application has been submitted. If it were to be received, we would continue our policy of treating every applicant equally, consistent with statutory requirements. The process would automatically trigger a series of regulatory and environmental reviews at federal, state, and local levels, including the town of Catskill Planning and Zoning Boards. At this time, however, no application has been received. So, one of the things that I want to accomplish tonight is just dispelling some of the rumors. I've heard that from some people that they thought it was already a done deal, and how could we march against this? So far, it's just between these two private companies, and the town has yet to even see an application for a permit. It's not to say that they couldn't do something in advance or preemptively, whatever. That is their choice. But that means that they would have to be circumventing the standard procedure, the due process that's in place now. And I think as residents of Catskill, long-term residents, we have to think long and hard before we push them to do something like that. I think that's one of the things that really rests on our shoulders as much as the town board. If we feel like it's important enough for them to go ahead and do something preemptively, or if we want them to follow the due process that's in place now. That's hopefully what Judith will speak to, or maybe you'll touch on it anyway, and certainly I hope what comes up in the questions, the Q&A tonight. The other thing is, what's a big unknown is how much do we stand to make from it? What in terms of tax revenue are we talking about? At this point, that's completely hypothetical. Again, rumors abound about, $250,000, $1 million a year. Nobody really knows because nothing has happened yet. But there's a lot of reasons for us all to get educated and learn about what we are talking about. So that's why we're here tonight. We've lined up 3 wonderful speakers. And where's Jessica? Jessica, you're on? Jessica Roth wanted to also jump in. Jessica Roth is from Riverkeeper, thank you. And she just wanted to say a couple of words before I introduce our esteemed speakers. But she's nowhere to be seen. Maybe I'll throw it to her at the end. So we're going to go ahead and start then. Our first one, we're just going to go to the lineup right as you see them here. To my left is Judith Enck. Judith is actually from Greene County, so she's kind of a home county girl. Was born and raised in Cairo, graduated from Catskill High School. Oh, that's right. I read that too. Thank you. St. Patrick's. We all know about St. Patrick's. It's even better, She's spent her entire career working to protect public health and the environment. She began as an environmental advocate and has held top positions in state and federal government, a few of which are a regional administrator for the Environmental Protection Agency, otherwise known as the EPA, appointed by President Obama. Deputy Secretary of the Environment in New York State Governor's Office. Past president of the Hudson River Sloop Clearwater. Is now working, where'd the lights go? Oh, okay. Oh, good. No, that's better. You don't need to see me. She's now working with the Hoosick Falls Support Network, which is very dear to her heart and something we need to know about because that is a region that has been impacted by toxic contamination. So she's looking to help clean up their drinking water. And most of us probably will recognize her voice. I certainly did from WAMC. She's a weekly commentator and a regular panelist on the Roundtable, their morning show. So I'd like us now to welcome Judith Enck.
Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. So yes, I grew up in Cairo and I graduated from St. Patrick's in 1977. Do not do the math. I want to take a little bit of a different perspective in terms of process and then go through some of the facts that I and others have gathered on this project. So, what my friends and family know about me is I hate to do holiday shopping. Hate it, hate it, hate it. And about 2 Christmases ago, December 20th, 2017, I got a call from an environmental advocate in Pennsylvania telling me that the cement plant in Queens Ravina, Lehigh, was going to import a third of the state of Connecticut's solid waste to burn at that cement plant. And the DEC had already had approved them burning tires. And it was a hard issue because the cement plant is a big employer in the town, but almost instantaneously, some of the residents of Queens, a few women who are here tonight, reached out to their town board, their town supervisor, and their town board members, and they said, we know enough about this process to say no to it. And so literally within days, and I always felt bad for ruining the holidays for a small group of people, we did a news conference with the town supervisor of Queens, town board members, environmental leaders, and said, this is not acceptable in Queens. We are rejecting this. And then about a year and a half later, just a few weeks ago, the town board and the town supervisor passed a local clean air law putting tremendous restrictions on what the company can burn at that cement plant. And I think that is a local example just up the road of what local elected officials can do when they want to stand up and make environmental protection and public health protection a priority. We need to know that because this is a very serious proposal from Wheelabrator. Here's what we know so far. They want to build an incinerator ash landfill in the town of Catskill, about 1/2 mile from the Hudson River. They want to truck roughly 445,000 tons of ash every year into Catskill, and they want to do it for 48 years. Phase 1 and Phase 2 last 48 years. The incinerator ash would come from 3 of Wheelabrator's existing operating incinerators, one in Peekskill, Westchester County, one in Poughkeepsie, one in Hudson Falls. As Hudson mentioned, Wheelabrator is the second largest waste incinerator company in the country. They own 19 garbage incinerators and 3 ash dumps in the US and Britain. They are a waste burning giant, and they are about to get bigger. Go back. Yeah, now the smoke's next. That one. So that's the Wheelabrator incinerator in Westchester County, which would be sending Catskill its ash. Next slide, please. Keep it there. So Wheelabrator was just purchased by the Macquarie Bank, in Australia, one of the largest banks in the world. They were just purchased this past February. And we know that they have identified the Peckham Industries site for their operation. It would cover 159 acres of land. And I want to just spend a moment explaining that incinerators do not eliminate the need for landfills. Think about your wood stove or your fireplace. After you burn wood, what's on the bottom? Right. And I'm not too worried about that ash because it's from burning wood. I'm very worried about the ash when you're burning garbage because you know what's in the municipal waste stream. And lately, it's getting worse. With electronic material, you have more heavy metals. The more plastic that is burned, the more dioxin is formed. So remember this little equation. For every 4 tons of trash that's burned, you get 1 ton of ash. You get 2 types of ash. Fly ash, which is the fine particulates from the air pollution equipment. So the tall stack will have fabric filters. The toxins don't get destroyed after you burn them, but they get captured by the particulate controls. And then that winds up in the fly ash. And then bottom ash, which is the non-combustible residue remaining after burning. Next slide. Fly ash in particular has a high concentration of toxic compounds. The one I'm very concerned about is dioxin. What I do by day is I teach at Bennington College in Vermont, and I teach classes on plastic pollution and the need to reduce single-use plastic packaging. And I think after this project goes away, we should all work together on passing some local laws to reduce plastic packaging. When you burn plastic, dioxin is formed. Not a lot, but it doesn't take a lot of dioxin in the environment to cause harm. Dioxin is a human carcinogen. The fly ash also contains heavy metals, including lead, a neurotoxin which affects children's ability to learn, mercury, which damages our central nervous system and our kidneys in developing fetuses. We also know that ash has cadmium, arsenic, and chromium. And the stronger the air pollution controls, the more toxic the fly ash. So Wheelabrator wants to bring this ash to Catskill. I've identified where they say the ash will come from, but there's a little sentence in their site selection report that says that they could also have the potential to accept other inert waste streams could be brought here. Wheelabrator has had many meetings with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. They submitted an initial permit application to the DEC 2 years ago, in March of 2017. And in the application, Wheelabrator said, initial engagement with the public sector demonstrated community interest in having the project move through the due process review.
I didn't get the memo.
Well, that's in the Wheelabrator document. So Wheelabrator will argue that their ash is not toxic, and that is technically incorrect. But let me explain why they will say that. It's not regulated as toxic because in the mid-'80s, incinerator ash was failing the old leachate test. Fly ash failed all the time, bottom ash failed 39% of the time, and if you combined it, it failed the toxicity test 48% of the time. Now, if this ash was considered a hazardous waste under regulation, and if it had to go to a commercial hazardous waste disposal facility, it would shut down every garbage incinerator in this country. So what happened was the EPA tried to look at this more objectively, and Wheelabrator went to court and said that solid waste should be exempt from toxic testing. So the case went to the Supreme Court, which ruled in 1994 that ash must be tested, and if it failed, it had to go to a hazardous waste disposal facility. The State Department of Environmental Conservation was worried about that, so instead they declared the ash, quote, special waste. And then the Supreme Court left it to EPA to determine how the toxic leachate test was done. EPA weakened the testing protocol. This industry is very financially lucrative, and EPA allowed them to mix the fly ash with the toxic ash. And the important thing is the science is if you test it, you will find the heavy metals and you will find dioxin. One scientist referred to this regulatory process as linguistic detoxification. So a few words about Wheelabrator. In 2011, the state of Massachusetts fined Wheelabrator a record $7.5 million for violating the state's environmental laws, multiple violations. The Massachusetts Environmental Commissioner called it the highest fine ever for a state case arising out of environmental violations. Some of the Wheelabrator violations, including they found a hole in the roof and the side wall of the Wheelabrator ash house, enabling the release of ash into the air, failure to properly treat the ash before disposal, and release of wastewater into surrounding wetlands. And we have wetlands here at this site. At another Wheelabrator facility, release of 15,000 gallons of ash water. And that investigation started by the state of Massachusetts in 2009, but was not concluded until 2011. And we don't really have much of an environmental cop on the beat anymore, so it's a long time that problems will languish. And if you want a more recent example of how Wheelabrator treats its communities, the city of Baltimore has a Wheelabrator incinerator in a low-income neighborhood in Baltimore. Baltimore did a better job recycling and stopped sending as much waste to the Wheelabrator incinerator. So what did they do? They turned around and sued the city of Baltimore for $32 million for not sending them more waste. Wheelabrator targets communities that are economically struggling. They count on people not having the time to fight back against these proposals, which I think the turnout tonight and your continued work will dispel them of that impression. So here are a couple reasonable questions to ask. New York Department of Environmental Conservation has never approved landfilling incinerator ash in a quarry. Why does Catskill want to be the first? Ash residue is very fine. A lot of it will be carried by the wind to adjacent areas, and a lot of it will go across the river into Columbia County. How will the nearby Great Fly wetland be impacted? Remember Hurricane Irene. And so this ash landfill is not covered. We don't know how much money Wheelabrator is offering the town of Catskill. It's perfectly legal for them to suggest a host community benefit, which I call a public bribe. There's nothing illegal, but it's why communities come to why companies like Wheelabrator come to economically struggling communities. And they will provide property tax revenue, no doubt. But I think there are better uses for this site. I mean, I totally understand that the village leaders and the town leaders want to get this property back on the tax roll, but how about proactively going out and looking for environmentally sustainable businesses, like a solar farm, like a composting operation, something related to ecotourism. And I want to explain what happens if you just leave this to New York Department of Environmental Conservation, who the agency is made up of really good, hardworking, professional people. They don't live here. They're dealing with many, many different projects. And what happens, because DEC cannot not entertain a proposal like this, but to date they've said it's not a complete application. What happens is this soul-sucking process that goes on for at least, this will be 6, 7, 8 years, where there are hearings, where if you're opposed to the project, you're going to have to join forces, hire environmental lawyers, hire engineers, hire scientists. My conservative estimate is this will run $100,000 easily. I don't think it's likely that residents in Catskill are going to pony up $100,000, but that's what happens if these proposals are made in more affluent communities. So the time to stop this is before the process starts. This is not rocket science. We know enough about the science to know that this is bad for people's health, for the Hudson River, for the environment. And I think, next slide, I think Paul Gallay, the president of Hudson River Keepers, said it best when he said, we did not spend the last 50 years cleaning up the Hudson River to have it at risk with this project. Thank you.
I would just like to speak to one point that you just made. Catskill's not as poor as we tend to think it is. Our town supervisor, when she came on board, had $27,000 in the account to work with, and she just reported $700,000 reported to the state comptroller de Napoli. Those are the figures that I've been given, so I'm going to trust they're correct. So we're not that desperate. I don't want to paint the picture that we're this poor, struggling town grasping for anything. We don't need to be that because we do have some money in the bank. We are solvent right now. Okay, I just wanted to have that counterpoint to that. Next, okay, how's this?
Great, better.
Okay, good. Richard Webster. Richard Webster is the legal director for Riverkeeper. He formerly worked at Public Justice in Washington, D.C., the Eastern Environmental Law Center in New Jersey, and at Arnold, I always want to say Arnold and Palmer, Arnold and Porter law offices in New York. Before becoming an attorney, Richard was an expert hydrologist and environmental scientist. He has provided expert advice and support to, among others, the Natural Resources Defense Council, the Environmental Defense Fund, the Sierra Club, and the World Bank. Richard received his law degree from Columbia University Law School, where he was editor of the Journal of Environmental Law. He earned his master's degree from London University in engineering hydrology and a BA in physics from Oxford University in England. So please join me in welcoming Richard Webster.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm not going to make any claims to being local or having graduated from local high school, so I hope you'll still believe some words I say. But I did want to start with a little bit of personal background because I think it's important to understand where I come from with these things. I am as the intro said, I'm a recovering hydrologist. I switched to environmental law basically because it seemed to me that science wasn't really working. Really dumb proposals, if they could meet the legal requirements, of getting approved. And so common sense didn't seem to apply. Lawyers seemed to be in charge. So I figured, how hard could it be to become a lawyer? And it turned out to be a big mistake, but that's another story. Okay, so I've been around the country actually working on coal ash dumps. And coal ash dumps, the ash is somewhat similar to this. Not quite the same, but it's basically similar properties, very leachable, doesn't show up on the EPA leaching test as toxic, but it really is toxic. And I've seen a lot of towns that regret allowing these dumps. Basically, having a dump in the town impedes economic development. And I've seen many towns promise things that never materialized and ended up with pollution and problems. And they come to regret the initial decision of saying, oh, this will be great because we'll get some tax revenue, we'll get a host fee, etc. And then once a dump starts, it's very hard to stop it. I worked on the biggest coal ash dump in America, Little Blue Run in Pennsylvania. And it just expanded and expanded and expanded to the point where it was this 1,600-acre pond. And they were planning to extend it more. It spanned 2 states, actually. It spanned West Virginia and PA. And they were planning to extend it more. It took a big lawsuit to get them to take that expansion proposal away. And it ended up being a $200 million cleanup. So those are the stories that I've seen. And I think these are cautionary tales for Catskill and this area. Because it's a lot easier to prevent a bad proposal from coming to fruition than it is to close something that's already open. So as you might tell from the slides, I think from the intro, I'm from Riverkeeper. Our job is to protect the Hudson River and the drinking water for New York City. And basically, our perspective on this, as Paul Glay's quote makes clear, is that there's a legacy of toxins from industrial activity on the Hudson. Just to give you an illustration, there's a fish advisory in place. women under 50 and children under 15 should eat no fish from the Hudson. So, and we've made some progress in terms of water quality, but fish species have not recovered. So we're dedicating to reducing that legacy pollution, preventing new sources of pollution, and recovery of the fish and other organisms. So where does this fit in with this proposal? Answer, this proposal will put more toxins into the Hudson, either because it leaks or because the toxins go out through the local sewage treatment plant. And that is absolutely the wrong way to go. The Hudson is an invaluable resource that we need to enhance and protect. Okay, well, I think Judith eloquently told this story already, so I don't need to do that, which is basically, there's all this argument about leaching tests, and you can read the science, but the bottom line is that the way the leaching tests work is you put acid in, and then the acid leaches out the metals, but where the ash is itself alkali, the alkali then neutralizes the acid, so you can end up with not all the metals coming out. And so it basically undercounts the metals in the ash. And because it undercounts the metals in the ash, then the ash looks less toxic than it really is. So that's, and this is, there's some more science there, or at least there was some more, while Judith was at the EPA, there was some more science going on. I don't know how it is now, which is experiment to a different leaching test that indeed shows that if you put more acid in, you get more metals out. So where is this Wheeler-Brader proposal right now? Well, it's basically in abeyance. Wheeler-Brader applied to DEC for a landfill permit back in March 2017. DEC did a pretty good job at analysing what was going on here, and it basically found that there's limestone with conduits in the area. You see that because there are springs in the area, and those springs are a result of, they're basically the ends of pathways in the limestone that take water directly from one place in the rock to another. So in those kind of situations, it makes it very hard to monitor the groundwater because your wells tend to miss those conduits. So basically, your groundwater goes straight past the wells. And one of the requirements that DEC has for landfills is they have to be what's called monitorable. You have to be able to tell, is the liner leaking? And in a situation where you have preferential pathways where they may bypass the wells, you can't tell whether the landfill is leaking. So they found the site is unmonitorable because of the ground conditions, and we'll hear a lot more from Dave about those. And they also found that it's a quarry, it's down into bedrock, it's impossible to meet the bedrock separation requirements. And Wheeler-Brader tried to add on various bells and whistles onto the proposal, and DEC said, the point of these siting requirements is it's about the site. We know, basically, that all liners leak in the end. The whole point of the regulations is to make sure that landfills are on sites where, if it does leak, it won't cause a big environmental problem. So we don't really care about your bells and whistles, we just think this is the wrong site. Now, what does DEC do in those circumstances? They don't say, never come back to us again. What they say is, your application has failed to show that you met these requirements. So we're going to deem, the jargon is we're going to deem your application incomplete. Right, so once the application is deemed incomplete, then the applicant is at liberty to come back and submit more stuff later. But there is no ongoing process. So basically, DEC has done a good job here at recognising the potential water impacts. There is no ongoing process at the DEC right now. So the application is dormant. But the DEC isn't in the business generally of killing these projects. It is in the business of this excruciating process. And it's not a process that you want to wait for, because you could be waiting for Godot could be quicker than waiting for DEC sometimes. Why do I say it will definitely put toxins in the Hudson River? The reason is, what's going to happen with the leachate? Leachate is generated when either rainwater or intruding groundwater hits the ash. it then leaches out heavy metals like lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic. And then they have a leachate control system. They suck up the leachate. And then what are they going to do with it? Well, at the moment, and this leachate, by the way, has the salinity of seawater. What that means is it has a lot of ions, metal ions, in the leachate. What are they proposing to do with it? Answer, truck it to the local sewage treatment plant. Why is that a bad idea? Because basically the sewage treatment plant is designed to treat sewage, right? It has a settlement phase, then it has a biological treatment phase where they blow air through, bacteria grow. None of that does anything for metals. If anything, adding metals can upset the treatment process that is going on. And so basically, by doing this, what they're doing is they're taking a pollution control system, then they're pouring those pollutants directly into the river. And that has to be unacceptable. And so, you know, if you don't take anything else away from tonight, take away the fact that this is a crazy proposal to dump toxins directly into the Hudson River. You know, as an anecdote, I once went to a sewage treatment plant in the UK, and it was just primary treatment, so they settled, and then they get sludge from the settlement. And I said, well, what do you do with the sludge? They're like, oh, well, once a month we grind it all up and we send it down the outfall. So this is kind of a similar approach, right? It's sort of, you know, it looks like treatment, but it actually doesn't do anything. Other issues with this proposal? Well, the ash is light, as Judith said, so you're going to get dust problems. I mean, you know, coal ash sites, coal ash dumps, everywhere you see ash spread around. And this is going to be no different. I did some calculations on the truck traffic, which I think are optimistic. I came up with, 38 trucks a day. More learned folks than I came up with 100 trucks a day, but whichever way you want to play it, it's a lot of trucks a day. And you've got to ask yourself, remember, those trucks are laden with ash. They're nominally covered, but you get bits dropping off here and there. And so you want to ask yourself, do you want, and those are just the ash trucks, then you have the leachate trucks. So you want to ask yourself, do you want all those trucks coming through your community? And if you don't know the answer to that, take a trip to some other communities, and I think you can ask the residents there what they think. And then there's this idea of, you know, will this generate revenue for the town? And I can tell you that the answer is no. The answer is, you put a dump in the town, you put trucks coming through the town, what does that do? It means that high-value businesses don't want to come here. It means that generally your rates will start to suffer, your valuations start to suffer, and so the town actually, far from profiting from a dump, actually loses money. And even the threat of a dump, and this is why, you know, Judith's right when she says this is a good time to do something about this. You know, don't sit around and wait. Because even the threat of a dump means that people say, I don't know, I'm not sure I want to go there. Do I want to be near the dump? No, right? That's surrounding the people who own land around. Can they do anything while there's a threat of a dump? No. Right, so the threat of a dump impedes everything else. So finally, you know, there's this question about what can municipalities do? And the answer is, as Judith has already alluded to, a lot, right? New York has a pretty liberal law in terms of what municipalities can do. And I've sort of got an escalating set of alternatives for the town. One is just publicly state it opposes an ash dump. That's pretty straightforward. 2, pass a resolution stating the opposition. And Catskill could do that, and other towns can do that too. And actually, we have some sample. If you're motivated to pass a resolution saying you think this dump is a bad idea, we have some sample resolutions in the other room, which you pick up and use for inspiration. And the final thing is you can pass a law. As Judith said, a number of communities have passed laws regarding pipelines, fracking, and refuse incineration. And here there's no in law they call it a vested right, right? If you have some right to do something, they take it away, then you have a lawsuit. But here they have no right to do it. The local zoning law doesn't make this a permitted use. It doesn't allow it right now. They would need a variance from local zoning law. They haven't even applied. So there's no vested right to put this landfill in this quarry. So therefore, you can pass a law that says that ash dumps within a certain distance from the Hudson are prohibited uses, for example, or you could make them a special permit use. There's lots of legal angles that you can use to signal that you do not want this dump here. So yes, it is private property, but at the moment, the owner of the private property has no right to site that dump there. Don't let anybody tell you different. So basically, we'll be open for questions later, but I hope that you realise that the future is in your hands, right? You can't wait for DEC to kill this. We have to get local people to come, make your voices heard, and kill this project as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. So now we have our fellow Catskillian, Dave Walker, has been a resident of Catskill and votes here for now over 16 years. He is the Professor Emeritus of Earth and Environmental Sciences at Columbia University. He received his PhD from Harvard, is a member of the National Academy of Sciences, and has a list of awards and medals that would take the rest of the evening if I went through them all. The most important reason for our discussion tonight is that Dave has taught the geology of our area for his entire career at Columbia. He has 16 years of experience studying and teaching the very structure we're talking about tonight, the structure, the hydrology, and the geological history of our area, including that in and around the Peckham Quarry. So Dave, are you one of those guys that we see like out Route 23 with all the orange vests? And...
Yeah, I'm out there every May.
Oh, that's wonderful. We love you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, David Walker.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much for coming on this evening. Right up to my mouth. Okay. Thanks very much for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. What I'd like to offer you tonight is a geological evaluation of the Peckham Quarry site with respect to the question of is it an appropriate place to put a toxic ash dump, and I'll explore such things as what is the bedrock limestone karstic, and I'll explain what that is. Will it leak toxic ash to the groundwater? Is it a good basin to put stuff in? And at what point will the toxins, how quickly will they get to the Hudson River? There are a couple of show-stopping problems with the proposal already, just right out of the gate. If you asked any group of geologists, there would be very quickly a consensus that the worst possible sort of bedrock that you could site this kind of a project on in Greene County would be the carbonates shown here in red along the eastern margin of the county, which form the Helderberg Escarpment. If you were looking for a bad spot within bad rocks, you would site the quarry or you would site the ash dump as close to the river as possible. And here the Peckham quarries are as close to the river as any point in the whole county. So this is a really unfortunate choice. It's astonishingly bad from a geological point of view before we even look at the details of the structure and the history of the area. What's the problem with limestone or the carbonates of the Helderberg Escarpment? Well, they're soluble in water and they become leaky after being dissolved for long enough. The limestone bedrock becomes porous, it cracks, the cracks enlarge by dissolution. And the end stage of this process is a terrain known as karst, in which sinkholes, caves, disappearing streams, terra rosa soils are formed, all of which are present locally and you get a leaky hydrology. It's impossible to keep anything in one place in a hydrology like that, as Richard mentioned. Karstification isn't anything like pregnancy where you are or you aren't. It's more like, when does a grape turn into a raisin? It's an imperceptible change to develop karst. And so really, the question, is it karst, which plays very large role in the back and forth between DEC and Wheelabrator, that is the wrong question. What you care about is not whether it has a shiny, distracting name like karst, but does it leak? Are you dealing in this quarry with a sealed basin, or are we dealing with a sieve? Here's a sealed basin, nice cast iron pot with a porcelain glaze on it. But if you chip the porcelain and get the iron inside to rust, you might conceptually wind up with something that's a little bit holier. Here's a sieve. So we want one of these, but if you're dealing with a limestone bedrock, you're probably dealing with one of these instead. Well, okay. What if we took this sieve, which, you know, maybe we could line it with something and it would still catch the stuff, and what if we turned it over? Here's a bunch of cross-sections through the geology of this area, largely orchestrated by Steve Marshak, whose thesis I was the field examiner for, so I feel it was done right. Here's a sieve upside down. Here's one upside down. Here's one that's turned on its side. This is not a promising sealed basin, because in addition to the fact that these basins are chopped up by tectonic forces, which are more or less like a train wreck, we're dealing with a series of faults. Oops, sorry, I'm not very good. Oops. We're dealing with a series of faults, detachments, you can call a detachment a fault on steroids, cleavages, and other virtually every line on this diagram is a potential pathway to send water into the depths of the groundwater resource. And for good measure, the quarry, which has that kind of geology that I just showed you, has been dynamited for about a century, and if you didn't have cracks before, you sure are going to have them after you've done that sort of a treatment. So it really would be hard to find a worse site in Greene County to do this project. It's the wrong rock type, it's tectonically damaged, it's been blown up for a century, and it's right near the Hudson. So this is not unknown to the DEC, and they sort of raised their eyebrows and said, what about it? And Wheelabrator actually said a lot. Their first installment about 3 years ago was this professional-looking report of in excess of 100 pages. That ran into a buzzsaw at DEC. They really took them apart. The letters from Vincent Fay and Vicki Schmidt were, I would have to characterize as politely hostile. And as a result, Wheelabrator took a deep breath and came back with a report that was in excess of 1,000 pages. And the difference between the two makes very interesting reading, but we don't have time for comparing them tonight. What the Wheelabrator professionals and their consultant engineers assert is that they know the geology, they know the geophysics, they know the hydrogeology of the area, and therefore it's an appropriate site. They told us so. What I'm here to suggest to you tonight is a careful reading of their own reports, say that there's a very serious disconnect between the facts that they present and the conclusions that they reach that this is an acceptable site for an ash dump of toxic waste. So let's talk about the geology that they know about. On the left, whoa, I got this darn thing wrong again. On the left, we have a map of the quarry site that's going to be used for the ash dump, if they get their way. And we have a cross-section through it. And in fact, they gave dozens of cross-sections, and I've chosen this one for reasons which will become apparent in a couple of more slides. And it's fine as far as it goes. It shows you the geology from a map view and from a section view. But you'll notice that there's white, unfilled area under there. There's a lot of geology which is well known in this region and in these quarries which is simply missing. Where are the detachments? Where are those faults on steroids which show so much damage and so much leakage in every other place where they're seen? Where is the manliest limestone, the Queemans and so forth, which are the principal karst formers in the region, the ones that are the leakiest? They're just simply removed or not in the picture on this map, and that's a serious omission if you're trying to understand the real risks that are present in the geological composition of this site. Oops, let's try this again. Marshak again, he shows you what the geology actually looks like. The quarry is right about here. There's a double layer of karstic manlius limestone underneath this quarry, which the Wheelabrator report essentially denies the existence of. That's a problem. Let's look at the geophysics which they've presented. It's a good survey. They used electrical sounding methods to essentially prospect for water channels and water intrusions into the depths of the quarry. Here's a Google image that shows you an eastern pond and a chain of 3 western ponds. And the red lines are in fact the lines of section along which they did their geophysical surveys that were looking for water. This box here, I'm going to show you their interpretation of what happens in the subsurface. This lurid color scheme is easy to decode. Everything that's blue is highly conductive and therefore wet. And what they show is the eastern pond has a big plume of groundwater coming out of it. The western pond likewise has a big plume of groundwater. And the major fault which they map in this position in the cross-section is in fact a conductive layer itself. Now, remember I faulted them for not showing you the manlius and the other things that are beneath the basal detachment onto the quarry. But in fact, the geophysical survey picks them up, and here it is there. So, you know, we have reason to trust this survey, and it's telling us this stuff is connected hydrologically at depth and very extensively. So the notion that this thing isn't going to leak is preposterous on the basis of their own information. They say, don't worry about it. There are at least 3 important lines of defense that say we don't need to take seriously what the geophysics and the geology are telling us. First of all, there's no manlius, I haven't figured this thing out. There's no manlius limestone, there's no karst, there's no leaks. But in fact, there is manlius present under this whole quarry, probably a double tectonic layer of it with detachments. And it's now visibly leaking onto 9W. Here's a picture of the spring which emerges from sorry, by the way, here, this is in the, I don't like this thing, it doesn't behave. Here's 9W, and I'm going to be standing there looking back up at the hill where the quarry is just behind. So here, looking at the spring, which emerges here from the hillside, there are, you know, solution-enhanced joints reaching right to here. This is south of Embo Road, so it's a little north of the quarry site. But it's very definitely connected to the hydrology of the quarry, because if you read page 1166 of their report, they dumped dye into the quarry and it came gurgling out here. So this stuff leaks, and it leaks in their own telling of the story. They do a wiggle dance to make you sort of be distracted from this obvious show-stopping leak. They say, well, you know, here's the leak in this part of the sieve, but up where we're going to dump the ash, it's perfectly safe. So I'm going to show you what happens at this end of the section, and I'll show you what happens right where they have the quarry. This is not rocket science to do from a geological point of view. You only have to drive along Route 9W, and here south of the quarry, near Cementon, there is in fact a cave. It's got a wet floor. Let's go right to where the quarry is. The quarry is just over the hill, the one that they're going to fill with ash, and right over the hill is the Tracy's Landing has a big pond there. That's the eastern pond in the quarry. Just east of that mid-quarry point, below the Tracy's Landing pond, there's a wet seep. That's 10 days ago. That one was wet. And you can see the glint through the trees of the afternoon sun coming off a wet surface. So the issue isn't, are these quarries leaking? The issue is, how fast are they leaking? We have only to go to the Wheeler-Brader report and look, you know, you just sort of leaf through the first 1,000 pages or so, and then you hit gold in the 990s. And they tell you, from having done a really good water budget, that these quarries are in fact leaking, and just one of them, the big one that they looked at, the Tracy's Landing, has a discharge rate into groundwater of about 100 gallons a minute. There's the number. It comes from them, not from me. If you say, how much water have you lost into the groundwater? It's 50 million gallons a year. It's more in wet years, it's less in dry years. So I submit that the disconnect between their own data, which shows a tremendous leak, and the conclusion that this is a perfectly adequate and safe site is not sustainable. They're showing you a smoking gun, but they're telling you it's only a leaky water pistol. Okay, the second line of defense is that the New Scotland can't develop karst, and therefore the green layer, this one here, which is the New Scotland, is going to be a seal to the bottom of the quarry. That's a good argument because the New Scotland is in fact quite full of clay. The problem is that the New Scotland is folded into an anticline here and a syncline there, which has been busted up a bit by faults. And when you do that to a clay-rich material, it develops something called axial plane cleavage, which turns out is a really good conduit for water. So, is the New Scotland a good seal? No. So here's a spring up at Jefferson Heights. Same deal. It's coming out of the base of the Manlius. And this one's got a pretty good discharge to it, but I should point out that this was the spring after Irene that I took this picture, so there was a lot of water in the system. But how did it get in the system? You know what? It uses the joints in the axial plane cleavage of the New Scotland to put the water right here into the lower part of the karst system of the Manlius. The New Scotland is not a seal, it's a funnel. It directs water right through it and right into the places where it's going to discharge, as you've seen it discharging along the Hudson. Okay, all right, good. Yeah, I haven't been, I was there 10 days ago and it wasn't that wet, but you know, we had some rain, so yeah. Right, very good. Okay, the third line of geological defense, it says this quarry is bulletproof, is the claim that the Holocene period, that's everything. Oops, I've done a number on that. I don't know if we're going to have these slides advanced, maybe. Yeah. Right, thank you very much. The Holocene is the modern time since the Ice Age, and the question is it really stable, or is bedrock motion still possible? Let me take you up to Route 23. Thank you, John. Sorry about my extreme clumsiness with pointers. Here's the big road cut along 23 just off the Jefferson Heights exchange. This is westbound traffic. Here's a sinkhole. Here's a sinkhole up at the top that's been truncated by the excavation of Route 23. And I'm going to take you down to this little sapling that's about halfway down the outcrop and show you what's behind that little sapling. I have indicated drill holes with these dotted lines, which were drilled in the excavation of this in the very late 50s. And instead of being this drill hole connects right through, oh look, there's been offset on that drill hole that has occurred since 1959. This area is not stable. Yeah, and if you back off, and so this branch I pruned so I could get a better shot that shows you not only do the drill holes show this disconnection of fault motion since 1960 or so, but the joint surfaces, which are badly eroded in this period because you're right under a sinkhole, are also offset. So the claim that this area is stable in modern times is not accurate. So we're in a position now to answer the question of, is this site an appropriate place to put an ash dump that isn't going to leak?
No!
It's the wrong rock type. It's next to the Hudson. It's tectonically damaged. It's leaking now, and it's still moving. And that's before they get around to making their hydrological separation zone by blasting the living daylights out of it and making it rubble to a depth of 10 feet at least. Wheelabrator knows this. The DEC knows this. That's why they gave him such a hard time. And now you know this too. And you guys are in a position to bring this to the attention of our good folks in government to see if we can get this stopped in time. So, since everybody knows this, Wheelabrator tacitly has given up on the geology of the area. What they do is they propose, we're going to put an industrial strength double liner in this quarry. To me, that's like taking that leaky sieve I showed you, going up to the price chopper, getting a bunch of baggies and stuffing it in there and saying the job's done. Imagine that you had a donkey, and the donkey gets a racing saddle put on it, and you pretend it's a racehorse. It isn't. It's still a donkey, and if you take it up to the Travers Stakes in Saratoga this August, it's going to end badly for you. In the same way that double lining this quarry is going to end badly for you. Engineering fixes of this sort are not going to give you an adequate protection from long-term liability. The issue isn't when it's going to leak. It is going to leak. The liner, when you put it in and dump ash on it, isn't going to be repairable. It isn't going to be repairable. So the liner is essentially just a speed bump on how fast the leachate escapes rather than a seal. And you have to ask yourself, is Wheelabrator going to be around in 50 years when the problems are going to develop? And you really want to know how good our insurance policy here in Catskill is. Well, I have a cautionary tale, and the number 50 years for the need for a cleanup is not randomly chosen. Here's the Hanford Reservation out on the Columbia River near Richland, Washington, which was the principal plutonium production facility for our nuclear stockpile during the Cold War. So, the fact that it was a nuclear weapons production facility for breeding plutonium means that there were a lot of very toxic and very radioactive fission byproducts which had to be disposed of. Nuclear ash instead of incinerator ash. So the DOE and their predecessor, the Atomic Energy Commission, didn't take a sieve and lining with a baggy approach. They took a double containment approach that was really a good deal more substantial. Reinforced concrete tanks lined with welded steel liners. Double containment engineering in the same way that Wheelabrator proposed, but on a whole different level. The problem is that they didn't foresee, there are always unforeseen consequences in engineering projects, they didn't see that the radioactive sludge would evolve hydrogen and then fuel chemical explosions within the tanks. So about a third of those tanks out at Hanford are leaking now, and the groundwater is contaminated by radioactive material. The good news is you can track it easily when it's radioactive. So there's the plutonium production facility with its tank farm, and it's taken about 50 years for the the radioactive waste to escape the tank farm and get very close to the river. This is a multi-billion-dollar remediation and cleanup project that the DOE is currently has in process. The 50-year timescale out in the desert of eastern Washington is going to be a lot shorter timescale in the Hudson Valley, where the precipitation is about 3 times as great, and where the quarry at the top of the Helderberg Escarpment has some extra hydraulic head to move the stuff through it a good deal faster than it moves out here in Washington. So my pitch to you today is, let's not become Hanford on the Hudson. Let's learn the lessons that we can learn from that and avoid inappropriate bedrock sites for storing nasty stuff. We should also avoid siting our toxic waste dumps near big rivers where if problems develop, they'll be broadcast. We certainly have to protect ourselves from long-term liability, and I don't think an adequate insurance policy for this is in place. So I think we should just take a pass on this ash dump project. It's a preventable disaster which is proposed to be put in the worst possible place in Greene County. And there's no national emergency like the Cold War forcing us to make this choice now. Don't buy the wheelabrator pitch. Here's that donkey with the racing saddle on it. If you enter it in the wheelabrator sweepstakes, we're all going to be jackasses. So I urge you to say no, say it now, say it often, and say it loudly.
Thank you. Dave, I think you should run for office. We need you in Catskill. And the other good news is that we found Jessica. Jessica Ruff is from Riverkeeper and had some important practical information to share with us.
And I'm going to stand up since I'm sitting on a box over here. Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Ruff. I am the Director of Advocacy and Engagement at Riverkeeper, and I am thrilled that you are all here. This is an incredible turnout and a really great first step in people power, because that is what makes the difference in all of our lives, right? So give yourselves a big hand right now. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that this is the beginning, right? And we are fired up and ready to go. Next Friday, on May 3rd, we are going to have a community organizing meeting, a get down to work, make a plan, figure out next steps. That's going to be at 6 o'clock. We're currently scheduled for it to be here, but since y'all blew us away tonight, we are also looking at larger venue options, so stay tuned. And to stay tuned, what you need to do is make sure you have signed in. Is there anyone in this room who did not sign in yet? All right, there are clipboards out in the other room on your way out. There is a sign-in sheet. There is also a petition to say no to this project. They are two different things. We will be in touch with you if you sign up on either of them, but be sure to sign up on both of them. And we will definitely send to you the PowerPoints that were here tonight, as well as audio and live streams so that everyone can share it, because this is, like I said, the beginning. You got to spread the word. We got to get as many people to know what's happening. All the people that were out on the sidewalk, I think, signed in as well, and so we're going to get the information out to them, but send it to your friends, your families, send it to your enemies. Doesn't matter. Everybody needs to be united on this, because this is a really potentially dangerous problem, and this turnout tonight is just an amazing step in stopping this process before it even gets going, because that's what we really need to do, right? So much harder to stop something once it's already in existence. If we can stop it before it comes in with all of its dirty, dangerous, toxic problems, then we're that much farther ahead, and we can move into the direction of a nice, clean, renewable, positive economic development for this area, which is what everybody really wants. So please be sure to sign in. Please be sure you will then hear from me. Many of you probably already have heard from me. That is me, Jessica, whose name is on everything and who you've been emailing. So if you have any other questions for me, find me. You can send me emails. My phone number is on everything as well. And I will look forward to seeing you all next Friday at the meeting. And then you can all come and help clean up the river the next day, because it's Riverkeeper Sweep. So there's so many opportunities to help protect the Hudson River.
Thank you, Jessica. So we're just about to get to Q&A. And Kurt Rowe, well, you could tell us you live and have property next door to the quarry, right? Yes.
I owned property for 40 years next to Peckham in Catskill, and I was not a farmer when I bought the farm. So I said, what could I possibly do? So I ran into some local guys having spring water and eating watercress one spring. And I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. So I had the water tested. I went to the New York State Health Department, and I sold my Crystal Peak spring water down in Manhattan for about 2 years. It's a great place and a tremendous resource. right? It's as good as any of the Saratoga waters or even European. And I'm certainly hopeful that we can stop this because we do have a really unique resource. Thank you.
Okay, Jessica's going to be running the, oh, there you are.
I was hiding.
First question.
Okay.
Robert.
Good evening. My name is Robert Tomlinson. Thank you for all the valuable information that you shared with us tonight. I think this is a cornerstone for making good, sound decisions is to get the facts. Something that's frequently missing in a lot of government decisions, that along with common sense. The thing I would like to say is not a question, but asking that we keep in mind as the village develops a 10-year comprehensive plan, that we're willing to look at the bigger issue, not only exclusively about the incinerator, but what are we going to do with our trash? What do we do with our trash now? This incinerator is taking trash from 3 other counties. Where's our trash going? Can we take responsibility for what we are generating and maybe emulate looking at what Baltimore did and actually reduce the amount of trash that we make so that we become more responsible to our immediate environment? Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Next, question right here, Dan Arshak.
Well, this was a great presentation. I really appreciate it. It's totally educational and motivational as well. Since this has come up, I've been doing my own piece of research, and I think I've learned some things that I'd like either some confirmation or have debunked for me. So let me just say 3 things. One, I understand that fly ash can be used to make cement. And if that's the case, if you add water to fly ash, does it make cement? Can you make cement with it? And if that's the case, why can't they just add water to it there and have it turn into cement? So that's question number 1. Question number 2, I do understand that the incineration process catalyzes most, if not all, of the toxic chemicals that we're concerned about being in the fly ash. Catalyzing meaning that it sort of turns it into a ceramic. Unlike the dioxins that have been taken out of the bottom of the Hudson. So I wonder how concerned we ought to be, or not, about catalyzed chemicals in the fly ash. Let's leave it at that. Cement and catalysis.
All right, so on the cement side, you'll hear the industry say, you know, that a pozzolic reaction occurs, and that's not fully true. While it remains wet, it can harden up quite a bit, but once it dries out, then the reaction reverses and it goes back to friable material. So no, it doesn't turn into cement.
They use it as a cement additive.
You can use it as a
Or a cement extender.
You can.
Which is a cynical ploy to get rid of some of the fly ash. It is not sustainability.
Right.
It's burying a certain amount of fly ash into cement. Most people who want to use cement for high quality construction don't want any fly ash admixture.
Yeah, right.
They don't want it.
So,
they don't want it in their buildings.
So that's the first point. So just to repeat what the gentleman said, which is quite right, which is there are some approaches where you encapsulate it into cement, so use it as an extender. Generally, the cement's thought to be lower quality, and so it's not used in critical places. In terms of catalyst, that I don't know where that information came from, but that doesn't happen. As we've said, the metals remain leachable, and you know we can go. I mean, coal ash is a very similar thing. If you want to come with me to Little Blue Run, I can give you a little tour. And there's arsenic, there's boron, there's cadmium in the groundwater there, and it's costing First Energy $200 million to clean it up. So I think First Energy would be very happy if that were true, but it turns out it's not.
Okay, thanks. Question, Laura Morgan.
Thank you. Well, to preserve our historic, cultural, and natural heritage here, could we not consider moving our beautiful region toward a UNESCO World Heritage Site to protect us, like the Loire and the Rhine valleys, or sections of them, from the predations which are bound to come from all directions over the next years? And I think there's so many people in this room who've done so much to preserve the cultural and natural riches of the area, that it's perhaps the right time to move toward that and to consider a joint site that is both cultural and natural. Those are two different designations for the UNESCO World Heritage Site. And starting in that direction, could we not also consider that, like the EU and like Great Britain, we have a village cultural capital of the Hudson Valley that is passed around from village to village, town to town perhaps, like the UK, that would highlight the cultural and historical riches of our area and make us more invulnerable over the long run to these dreadful schemes.
That's great. Okay. Yeah, thumbs up. Hey, this gentleman. And could you say your name, please?
My name is Jeff Christensen. I want to thank you all for tonight. This has been really enlightening. I live in Rhinebeck, and for those of you that don't know, Rhinebeck is one of the Hudson Seven. The Hudson Seven are Lloyd, Esopus, Hyde Park, the city and town of Poughkeepsie, and the village and town of Rhinebeck. The Hudson Seven take their drinking water from the Hudson. Over 100,000 people take their water from the Hudson River just downriver from Catskill here. So what Wheelabrator needs to know is they're not going to be facing a handful of citizens that are concerned in Catskill. They're going to be dealing with tens of thousands of people throughout the Hudson Valley. And if they think this is going away, they're wrong. I would advise them to consult with Con Ed and their experience that they had with Storm King, which took, after 22 years, Con Ed threw in the towel. So Wheelabrator, wake up.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Tom Ellis. I live in Albany, and I've been working on dump issues since the 1980s. And I agree with what the panelists say, is that we should not trust in DEC to do what's right, that we should kill this project immediately. And my experience with DEC is, right now DEC is allowing a construction and demolition debris dump to operate in the city of Rensselaer, right next to a large public school. Last year, DEC granted the town of Colony a permit to enlarge its regional landfill, which sits literally right on the edge of the Mohawk River, and it sits on top of an unlined hazardous waste site. They gave them like a 20-year permit to keep operating this dump. We cannot trust DEC to do what's right. I don't think DEC would approve this project, but politics is politics and bad things happen. We definitely can't trust DEC. You have to stop this thing now.
All the way in the back. Did you have a question? Okay, all right, fine. Margaret?
I don't have a question. I'm saying call Governor Cuomo.
Okay.
All right, I got his number here, 518-474-8390. It can't hurt.
Okay, did everybody hear that? 518-474...
8390.
8390. Thank you so much. Okay, Margaret Dornbach?
Yeah, the last gentleman pointed out that there are political issues that affect this. And my concern is that we approach this in the most effective way. I don't know if everybody here is aware of the political situation in the town of Catskill. The town of Catskill voted for Donald Trump. There's a very high percentage of Republicans. Many Republicans are not going to be in favor of this project, but many Republicans will be. My concern is that it may be much more effective to put pressure on the DEC, which has already failed to approve the last version, and I feel like we should put our efforts in the most effective way.
Thank you very much, Margaret.
So I just want to quickly respond, but first I want to say, in terms of Dave's comments, who knew geologists were so funny? So thank you. And I think what we need to do is put science first. I have been doing environmental protection work for over 30 years, and I do it in a nonpartisan way. Yes, I was appointed by President Obama to serve at the EPA, but environmental protection is not a Democratic issue, it's not a Republican issue, and you need to get active and talk to every elected official, everyone running for office, and do not cut any party any slack. If people cannot stand up on such a vital issue like this, maybe they should not be representing this community.
Can I just make a comment? Please. In Pennsylvania, I was out there in deepest Pennsylvania Trump country, and guess what? Even Republicans don't like a dump in their town. One of the members of the organization I was representing there, his email was wehateliberals@gmail.com. And I sort of broke it to him, well, I'm kind of one of those liberals. Yeah, but you're the good kind of liberal. But the second thing is, DEC, there is no decision pending there, right? This application is dormant. They've said basically it's incomplete, so they have no decision to take. Whereas your local town has a decision to take. Do they support this or not? So I would urge you, in terms of activism, in terms of calling, to direct your calls at your local towns and make sure that your local towns express opposition to this.
The town of Catskill has not received the application yet. Now, that might just be a technical thing. Fine, I'm just saying, just for the record, so everybody knows, what you're saying is to circumvent the given process. And maybe that's what we should be doing. But just be aware of that.
Well, it's not saying circumvent the process. I mean, what lawyer would say that? Come on, what I'm saying is be proactive. Don't sit back and wait.
Absolutely, that's what we're doing
State a position and then make a resolution, and then if you can get a law passed, that would be excellent. But go down that path. The DEC isn't going to save you here.
Can I say also one thing on that, which is that the fact is that the DEC is constrained by the fact that they don't have a decision in front of them right now, whereas the local community municipal governments are not. They can act proactively. That's the problem. The DEC can't get in front of this and go, well, if you decide you think you might do this, we're going to say no. But all of these local villages and towns and municipalities can do that, can create resolutions, can pass laws, can step out in front and say, no, we do not want a toxic ash dump in our area. That is not okay. And they have that ability to do that, to step out in front and protect all of us and all of our drinking water and all of our air and the Hudson River. That's their jobs. And they can do it without an application in front of them. And that's why DEC is not the action point right now. They may be in the future, but let's not even let it get that place, because that can be decades down the line at this point. Let's get it done now.
John Phillips.
John Phillips, Catskill. A lot of you know me. I can tell you, I have asked a lot of Republicans if they would like cancer. No takers. Math is just like science. It's a very unforgiving thing. And what is 445,000 tons? It's 890 million pounds a year. At $1 a pound, maybe that would pay some bills, but I don't think we're talking about that. 890 million pounds is going to be split up into what interstate regulations permit trucks to carry. The maximum a double axle truck can carry between states is 34,000 pounds. 34,000 into 890 million equals 26,500 some odd trips a year. Where are those trucks going to go? Well, every day, if you're working a 5-day week, that's 100 truck visits to a dump a year from whatever points, however you work it out. A day. A day. Over a course of a year, you're going to get 26,000, and that's going to be over 48 years. So that's what 445,000 tons looks like. What is going to be what are going to be the options that Wheelabrator foreseeably can come to us as to how they present that here and what different adverse impacts would that have in each scenario.
If you could tell us your name, please.
My name is Giuseppina Agovino, and I'm from Catskill, New York. I actually have the opposite problem of all of you. We're actually trying to get solar in Catskill, and they did pass a resolution against the solar, stopping it completely before it even got off the track. So you can't stop this project, and you're not alone. Mothers Up Front will help you. At organizations, we're done. We need to save our planet for our kids, for our children, for their future. Toxic companies like this have to go. There's a better choice. Solar companies, they're offering $500,000 a year for the installation of solar panels. That's awesome. There's millions of ways to do this, and millions of people that will help you. Do not give up. And I'm in Catskill, and I will definitely join your fight, and Mothers Up Front will join with you guys. This is not happening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you use Scott Meyer?
Nope. As far as I go.
I don't get the pleasure of data-driven scientists of this caliber, so I'm going to take advantage. And I'd like you to help me understand what I think occurs is you have all of this raw garbage, and then you concentrate it in fire. And then you put it in an area where you're going to put water in it. So in my understanding, one of the problems, well, one of the things nature does is take leaves, puts them on the ground, and they decay, and they decompose. But one of the problems with dioxin, for instance, that's it. It's dioxin. And so this process of heating and concentrating brings this permanent addition into the environment. And that's also true for heavy metals. Is that true? Like cadmium, lead, and the rest. So this is really almost a process of concentrating things that are permanently here. Understood.
You pretty much got it. So the combustion process does not destroy the heavy metals, the dioxin, the other contaminants. What happens is it concentrates, particularly in the fly ash and some of the bottom ash. And what has me particularly concerned is if you look at the municipal waste stream, it's changed a lot even in the last 10 years. People have phones, they have computers. It's a lot of heavy metals that get tossed out. And then one reason why I've shifted my work to work on preventing plastic pollution is because the dioxin is a byproduct of burning plastic. And we also know that plastic recycling is not working. Worldwide, we only recycle 9% of our plastics. Tomorrow morning, I'm getting up really early, grabbing my students at Bennington College, and then going up to Montpelier to testify at a hearing in the Vermont State Legislature on a bill to reduce single-use plastic packaging, which we need to do here if the state won't do it, and the state's doing a bit of it. The state's banned plastic bags effective March, but we can ban polystyrene in Greene County, we can have straws upon request. So I'm feeling comfortable that we're gonna have to do a lot of work here. Wheelabrator's not gonna go away on their own. They've got a lot of money, they've targeted the site for a reason, but while we're working against this, some gentleman said, what are we doing with our own waste? We can work together as a community to reduce plastic packaging.
Yeah. Great idea. Yes, sir, way in the back. Yes, please, if you could come forward a little bit, because our line doesn't reach that far, our cord.
I'd just like to make it very clear that this is not a Democratic Party or Republican Party issue. What this is about our land, right? And
if you could identify yourself too.
My name is Jack Keller. I live in Catskill, town of Catskill. I am a county legislator from District 1. And
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
With everybody else.
My goal, yes, with everybody else, and I commend everyone here. When I was fortunate enough, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, I went to the Norman Rockwell Museum, and their exhibit that summer was the 4 freedoms, and they were all very touching to me. But when I saw freedom of speech, my eyes got wet. This is not a political issue. This is true democracy.
Thank you.
My name is Frank McKee. I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Now, they're both quality of life issues. I have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Now, as these trucks travel, will this dust get into the air?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And my second question is, how is it going to affect the groundwater to the homes surrounding the quarry?
Excellent question.
I wouldn't drink water out of a well in Smith's Landing if this particular project goes forward. I wouldn't go drinking water out of the Fly, but I wouldn't do that anyway. It's bad stuff. You just, there's no escaping it, and it's going to get into the groundwater. The only issue is it going to be 50 years, or is it going to be 25, or is it going to be 10? That's the issue.
Yes, you're way in the back, Jessica. Actually, okay, let's go ahead and have you, and then this gentleman next to you, right after.
Yeah, my name is Craig Drummond, live in Catskill, and just 2 things. Back in 2005, the town of Hudson and the surrounding area, they beat the St. Lawrence Cement construction project against an enormous international conglomerate based in Switzerland, I believe. And it was a hell of a fight, but they never gave up. And they beat them. And if they can do it, we can do it. And I just want to second what this woman said from Coxsackie. And this is something, I'm not Native American at all. I don't have a drop of blood in me. But one of their things that they think 7 generations down the line. It's about our kids. We're going to be gone, not too shortly. But we want this planet to last a little longer than that. So let's go kick some butt.
Thank you, Craig. And then, the Opus 40 hat is next. Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm from Catskill. Just by a show of hands, who else from the local government has attended this meeting? We have 1, 2. We have
2 of them have left already.
2 people.
Here for the...
So 4 people altogether.
Well, Mr. Bulick was here, and
So there was 4 altogether?
Yeah, Pat McCullough was here.
And how many showed up when Wilbur Raiders showed up with a check?
They were all there. Well, to be fair, they came to the town meeting, so of course everybody was in attendance there. That said, though, at the village board meeting, a lot of the county legislators came to that. The county legislators who I know saw them there.
Well, the reason I ask is because we have other scientists giving a opposite point of view, and you would think they would want to see both sides of the equation.
Oh, I can even top that. I invited somebody from the town planning board, the Catskill Town Planning Board, who would be the first in line to, and she said, oh, I can't attend that. That's going to be nothing but preconceived notions.
No.
So, I love irony, but the fact that she was telling, she wouldn't go because she thought it would be only preconceived notions. So, I'm not saying she's representative of everybody, but certainly you can tell what they're predisposed to listening, who they're predisposed to listening to. They were all invited, correct?
Yeah.
So,
well, let me suggest that after tonight they might be predisposed to listen to you. So why don't you give them a call?
I invited one, and she said she was going to come, and I haven't seen her.
Okay.
well, there was a lot of people couldn't get in, and they really couldn't hear outside.
Yeah.
So I know that was true for Mr. Bulick.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, for those that weren't here, give them a call.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'd be very happy to hear from you.
And as I mentioned, y'all, within a few days or so, you'll all have the information, you'll all have the presentations, and so you can feel free to forward that as well.
Okay.
I won't need a mic. I'm loud enough. Hello everyone, my name is Richard Wagner. I'm a local business person and just a community volunteer. There was talk about contacting town officials. The town supervisor, Doreen Davis, was here, but she did have to slip out. Her number is available, 518-943-2141, extension 8, if anybody would like to reach out to her personally. And there's also a lot of talk about reducing plastic and reducing waste. I think it's also important to focus on ways to replace that. There's a hemp initiative in New York State to start producing hemp, and that can be used for so many different things that could provide jobs and opportunities that we need, that without them is why we have that vacuum that places like Wheelbrader want to come in here. They see the opportunity. We need to fill that void with production of stuff being grown and made and produced here that is safe for the community and safe for the environment. So put that on your radar, do the research. It's on the New York State website. You can find all you need to know about it. And it's the way of the future. I'm upset that we're not already really far ahead with this.
Thanks, Rich. That was great.
Hi everyone, I'm Gillian Nash and I live in Catskill. And when I've been in the village talking to locals, anyone that's pro the dump site, one thing they bring up is that, oh, well, if it's not here, it'll just be somewhere else. And from coming here tonight, I see how this is specifically a really bad site for something like this. Just our conditions, but I am wondering if we do beat this, what will happen? Will they just go somewhere else to another community like ours?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for raising that. I think the answer is probably yes. And if we're successful in getting it out of Catskill, we all then, I think, have an obligation to go to the next town. You know, we're all here as volunteers. None of us are paid to do this. And I think we're going to keep the band together, and and you're going to moderate, and we'll go to whatever town is next. I mean, I'm involved in opposing a garbage incinerator in the Finger Lakes. Believe it or not, a private company wants to build a garbage incinerator in the Finger Lakes. And what's so interesting is we passed a bill in the state legislature unanimously to prohibit it. It's going to go to the governor's desk soon for his decision. And the local people there, mostly volunteers with Seneca Waterkeeper, have pledged that if that incinerator shows up anywhere else, they'll follow them there. And so it's a great way to make friends and keep each other informed. There's nothing good on TV anyway. So we're going to continue to be voices for public health and protecting the environment. And I think Stina Cutson had a question in the back.
Well, can I just... Yeah, Jeff, can I just make one more point on... Can I just make one more point on that, which is that there's nothing written in stone that says these incinerators have to produce ash forever. And at some point, the ash acts as a choke point. I mean, this happened to a power plant I was working on in Pennsylvania, where we closed one site for their ash, then we closed another site for their ash, and now they're closing the whole power plant down. And that was I think it was a 2.7 gigawatt coal plant. So when you put pressure on the waste stream, it raises costs, and ultimately they're in the money-making business, and so ultimately, you know, they decide it's not a money-making business anymore. So there's nothing that says this will be made forever.
You know what we said at the beginning of Riverkeeper, stop up the fight.
Jeff.
Jeff Ansovino from Stina Cutson. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to make a comment and ask a few questions. And first I want to thank Riverkeeper and Jessica for organizing this amazing forum. Give them a big hand, they really deserve it.
It was a very big group, community, and many organization effort. I just want that to be very, very clear.
Mary.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to the speakers, too, and Hudson for moderating. The speakers were terrific, and I came here to learn, and I learned a lot, and I think especially the geologist, David Wilson, is it? Dr. Wilson? Walker, Dr. Walker, I really appreciate that because just last week I got a 1,300-page FOIL from the DEC. I saw their 2018 response and looked at those geological maps and cross sections and said, "Oh my God!" And I'm glad we have someone
go on forever.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we have someone that can make sense and put some science into it. So we're going to be watching this very closely. But I had a couple questions, and one is it doesn't appear that any of this material will be coming in by barge, and I don't think there are any federal permits required at this point that I know of. It's not even an application accepted, but I did talk to the Department of State today, and the person I talked to there is concerned about it, and they said if there would be any federal permits or funding or agencies involved, they would be taking a very close look at it, as they did with the St. Lawrence Cement. The other question is, has anyone looked at environmental justice issues with respect to Smith's Landing and income levels in that community? Because I don't know a lot about it. When I drive past it, it looks like it needs a little bit of help, and I'm not sure about the demographics, but there may be an actual EJ issue associated with this as well. So thanks again. I'll just leave it to Jessica and Riverkeeper.
Did you want to speak to that, Judy? Yeah, so thank you, Jeff. I don't know about the environmental justice demographics of the community, but that's a good point, and we will certainly look at it. They can bring the ash by barge, by train, or by truck, and the limited information tells us at this point it's by truck. It'll come from the south and from the north, and that one little line we found in, I think, Appendix E also opens the door to other incinerators, not just these three. Which I think is very important, and Wheelabrator's having a very hard time with their other ash dumps in the Northeast. One in Massachusetts is unlined and in Saugus, and it is in a wetland. And the state of Massachusetts has said for years that they would close it, and they haven't. And so that's a state agency not doing their job. But I think I don't think there are federal permits, and the one I thought there could be is if they're the small wetlands that are regulated by EPA and Army Corps of Engineers. But unfortunately, you know, the Trump administration has rolled back about 70 federal environmental regulations, either rolled them back or delayed them. And one is Waters of the United States, which based on Dave's presentation could have been very valuable on connecting water bodies. But I don't think we can count on this EPA or this Army Corps of Engineers to step up on this.
I think one of the points, I'm not sure if anybody touched on it tonight, that makes Catskill attractive to them, if I understand correctly, is it's about half the distance of where they're trucking to now, which is somewhere in Connecticut.
Well, it's going to 3 different places. So I think your point is good, Hudson. I think it's kind of halfway between Peekskill, Poughkeepsie, and Hudson Falls. But right now, the Peekskill ash is going to Putnam, Connecticut. The Poughkeepsie ash is going to Colony Landfill, and Hudson Falls ash is going to Shrewsbury, Massachusetts.
Wow. The ash that would be coming here is currently going all the way to Connecticut somewhere.
Right. Let me just interpret, by the way, there's a... Judith mentioned a phrase called other inert waste. Inert sounds very benign, but it doesn't mean that, right? Inert just means that it doesn't rot. So
it doesn't go away.
It's not like municipal solid waste where it rots and makes gas. This is a waste that doesn't rot, but that doesn't mean to say that it's benign.
And if you would be kind enough to say your name.
Yes, I'm Claire Davis, and I'm from Wyndham, but at one time I did live in West Coxsackie, and that was in the 1980s when Waste Management, the parent company, Wheelabrator, wanted to bring its have a dump site at Flint Mine area, where the Flint Mine was there with the archaeological site for the Native Americans. And so Raymond Beecher, who was the historian, the famous historian, and Rich Guthrie and I decided that something had to be done. And so we each wrote our own parts. One was mine was archaeology, and about the water and about the historic site and so forth. And we won. We knocked them out.
Yeah.
We had a meeting at the high school in Catskill, very well attended like it was here. We informed the population what it was going to be about and so forth, and said the site was totally unsuitable. And it was agreed that it was, and the state decided that we were correct, and they shut down the whole idea, and we got rid of waste management. This is in the 1980s.
Wow.
So this all continues, and so I just say that we're going to win this one. There's no question about it, because everything is in line and it's properly done, and it's going to be another win for Greene County.
Thank you so much. Hi.
Hi, I'm Mike Aguirre. I operate Riverview Marina down on the point, and my business is very dependent on the quality of the river and people enjoying it. I have something that was touched on. I'm right across the street from the water treatment plant in Catskill, and you mentioned that the leachate would be trucked there. I have two questions. How many trucks would be coming, and what route would they take? It would seem that they would come down right through the commercial district on 9W, down West Bridge Street, and have to make the turn at Main Street and go through the residential area to get to the water treatment plant. And is the water treatment plant diluting it, or is it removing it? Is it the same thing as taking those trucks and emptying them a cup at a time off the point?
Yeah.
Or is it basically removing these toxins somehow?
Right. So
and then what happens to them once they're removed?
Right. On the number of
Thank
trucks.
you.
So thank you for your question. Very insightful question. On the number of trucks, the answer is I don't know. I'm not sure how much is to be generated. On the route, you know better than I. Sounds like the route. Slightly bad news is they're also proposing to do this at night, because the treatment plant has lower volume at night. On the removal, I think as I tried to say in the presentation, the treatment plant will not remove these kind of dissolved metals. So it is just dilution.
It's basically dumping it in the
It's
river.
basically the same as dumping it straight in the river.
As if they pulled up to the pier.
It's just a very elaborate way of doing it.
Drip out, yeah.
It's like it's the theatre of pollution removal that doesn't actually remove any pollution.
And one other question, if I may. The leachate, how toxic is that leachate? If there were a car, an accident, and one of these trucks were to have a spill, what would have to be done to contain it, and what would the?
Well, you would have to clean it up. I mean, you'd have to contain it and clean it up, kind of like an oil spill or something like that, where you've got to try and take it out of the environment, because that leachate will. I'm not sure if they are going to do any toxicity tests, but generally these leachates would kill most things that they come into contact with.
Hi, my name is Kyle Rogers. I actually live at the south end of the Catskills in a little town called Grahamsville. I have a question for our panelists. I have a question for our panelists. Are you guys for or against waste to energy?
I'm very much against waste to energy. I think it's a source of air pollution, including carbon. If you look at carbon emissions, it's and the amount of electricity generated, actually more carbon comes from burning garbage than burning coal. There's the ash problems, there's the expense. There's not been a new waste to energy or incinerator project built in this country except for one in Florida in the last 20 years. I think an alternative, I'm guessing what your next question is, what do we do if we don't burn it all? Massive waste reduction, recycling, composting of organics, which is 40% of the waste stream, yard waste and food waste. And for things you absolutely can't reduce, reuse, compost, or recycle, a small government-owned landfill where there's an incentive not to fill it up. And I think it should be local, because you don't want to be pushing your solid waste problems onto other communities.
So,
let me just say that another angle on waste to energy, which is, you know, the industry has a problematic history of targeting communities of colour, putting their facilities there, writing very stringent contracts that require, I mean, this happened in Newark and in Baltimore, where there were stringent contracts, what are called put or pay contracts, which you have to put up a certain amount of garbage. You don't put it there, then you have to pay for the garbage that you didn't put there anyway. And so these waste to energy projects end up being a magnet for dirty facilities in communities of colour.
but are you against waste energy?
Yes.
Yes.
And you?
I don't know.
All right, fair enough. You guys also stated that when you burn garbage, it doesn't remove any of the toxins or anything like that, right? It just all concentrates into the ash. You also stated that, if I remember correctly, waste, 1 ton of, no, what is it, 4 tons of burned waste makes 1 ton of ash?
Correct. By the way, the toxics, there may be some, I mean, there may be some organics that can get
Okay, and you also stated that all landfill liners leak, right?
Eventually.
Okay, potentially. Eventually. So, if all of the toxins and problems from the garbage stay in the ash, and then you put it in the ground and all of it eventually leaks, because that's what it does. Why do we take up 4 times as much space if all the same toxins are going into the ground either way?
Just don't want to hear.
Say that again?
If you don't burn them, you don't make the dioxins. There's a big difference right there. The metals won't be in an activated state. You know, they'll be in whatever form they were when you put them in the waste stream and didn't burn them.
Well, the ash or the plastics aren't going anywhere if you don't burn them, to be fair either. But that's a good point.
I mean, we've been doing landfills for a long time now, which is that sort of like what the alternative would be?
I mean, well, I think what
if we're
Judith
not
is,
burning?
what Judith is saying is that,
Yeah, exactly.
right, and that's the point, right? Is that our job is to reduce the amount of garbage we're producing, and you know, compost where we can, get rid of single-use plastics, etc. Because there is no perfect solution for these things. I mean,
okay.
Also, for the record, waste to energy is a buzz phrase created by the incinerator business. That's not a real thing. It doesn't actually create energy. There's the physics of the whole process, and it's using their terminology. What it does is it creates pollution, and it releases a small amount of energy, and it concentrates the existing garbage into more toxic forms than it started. That is waste to energy, quote unquote, and I will only do it with air quotes.
I just got a wire report from Denmark. Yes, Randolph Horner. I'm a large-scale renewable energy developer and financier. To the point that this young man made, I just got a wire report yesterday. The island of Bornholm, which formerly, this wire report came from Denmark. The island of Bornholm, which for a generation and more has had a locally sited waste incinerator, and many different venues in Europe have had incinerators. Bornholm came to end of life for its incinerator, which is basically the state of play for the incinerators we're talking about here. They're old, they're worn out, they don't have much economic life. Bornholm has dedicated itself, instead of replacing the incinerator or sending all of its own waste off island to another incinerator in another city, they have determined they're going to pursue an expedited program to reduce, recycle, compost, and so forth and so on, just as Judith said. They have said they have made a landfill in the sky long enough, and they're not going to do it anymore.
Okay. Thank you so much. Any more questions? One back there, sir? Yes.
My name is Anthony Pilatich. I'm the son of Louis Pilatich, who was the son of Joe Pilatich. And I have a unique perspective no one else in this room has. To put the time my grandfather came over, they dropped him off. He took the Carpathia, met my grandmother. and the Carpathian took off to try to save the Titanic. So it was about that time. They settled in a place called Alston, New York. There's a little blue plaque today, which is right by Cementon. They farmed this land that you were talking about. As a child, I had the unique perspective to play on that property. There were springs that come out of the ground. We thought it was really unique, 7-year-old, to run up to get fresh water, cold, tasty, just like that gentleman said. Also, was hunting that property one day. I should have brought my fishing pole. I was about a half a mile away from the nearest quarry. And in the old potato field, when the water got high, you know, it was a pond. And lo and behold, there were 3 huge fish in that pond. So there are underground crevices that water travels, without a doubt. That land is loaded with deer, fishers. There's heron that come back every year. Fox. It's beautiful. I heard the line mentioned. That runs from 23A all the way down to Saugerties. That's wetlands above ground. But I'm telling you, underground is where the water is at. My well is tapped into that system. Just a little correction for you, Mr. Walker. That photo you put out there that showed 100 gallons a minute, before the state put an underground piping, that used to run between 100 and 1,000 gallons a minute. Wow. Yeah. There's an underground pipe that takes most of that water now.
Well, the budget was done in 2014, so
yeah.
You know, this is...
And for Wheeler Bader to insult my intelligence and call the quarry water groundwater, that's not true. I remember being a child. I get a little nervous talking in public. I remember being a child. I remember they hit water in the quarry. They hit the ground, they hit the water, and it filled up. A couple of days, the quarry was full. So for Wheeler Bader to come in here and say that's surface water insults my intelligence. So that's where they're starting from. Any other points? I think the whole thing is, that's not a place to put a garbage dump. You know, you got to have common sense. It's just not, you can't let this happen. And I'm pro cement plant, I'm pro Peckham for the businesses they are in. One final point, when the Alpha manager, he let the permit expire. This is hearsay, word on the street, and New York State wouldn't give a new permit to mine the quarry and run the cement plant at Alpha because of the pollutants. Now we're going to turn around and turn that into a dump. I just strongly disagree. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So we're going to wrap it up unless I think somebody has a burning question that they must ask. Otherwise, I'm just going to say, just remember this, as Jessica has said many times, this is the beginning. We want everybody to come on May 3rd, right?
May 3rd,
and
6 o'clock.
We're going to need a bigger venue, I think is what you're thinking.
Stay tuned. Sign up.
Yeah, but thank you. So, and in the meantime, just spread the word.
Donate so we can keep paying for these things.
Spread the word. There's a lot of people who have no idea this is going on. I was told tonight, people who live on Fike Road, which is like a stone's throw from the quarry, had no idea that this was in play. So it's up to us to spread the word. So thank you all so much for coming tonight. Thank you. Thank our panel. Thank you.